Well, it's a great problem needing more chairs. This is good. Okay, so can we advance the slides, please? Next. So welcome everybody to the first Designing for People seminar for September 2023. I'm Dr. Lisa Holsky. I'm one of the co-directors of Designing for People, and my home department is in occupational science and occupational therapy. And this year I'm chairing the seminar steering committee as well. So today I'd like to start the session by acknowledging the land upon which we are sitting. We are on the UBC Point Grey campus, and the campus sits on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Musqueam people. And I'd also like to acknowledge the elders present and past. Next slide, please. This is just to kind of prime you. There will be email announcements and letter announcements coming out for the upcoming events for the fall. We have the next two seminars already booked with Dr. Adam Clare for the first one in October, and Paul Addison and Sudey Ahani are speaking in November. We're organizing December. We have an idea, but it's not firmed up yet. And we have a new way of delivering the seminar coming in January of 2024. So one of the goals of the design community is to strengthen the regional partners throughout the province. And we have started meeting together to design seminars that are actually going to be hosted on other sites besides UBC. We will be doing the one in January, so you still will come to the same place and we will be the host for that session. But then after that, SFU, UBCO, UVic are going to be hosting our mid-month Wednesdays. We will still be offering a lunch here, and we want you to come in person. We will link in with the sites through here. So it's kind of the same for you. It's just who's hosting, who's going to change. So keep your eyes and ears open for exciting announcements about who's going to be presenting in 2024. Next, please. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Julia Bullard, who has chaired our Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. And I will turn it over to you to describe what's going on.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Hi, I'm Julia Bullard. I'm a faculty member at the School of Information, which means that I just hoofed it across campus and a little out of breath. I've been the chair, the faculty lead of our JEDI task force for the past few years, where I work with the members of the DFP staff and DFP students, taking the lead mostly from those student members on creating new initiatives around justice, equity, diversity, inclusion for our program, getting ideas on how to better showcase the work that we do in our research and our teaching around equity, and making little nudges to the design of our programs for better inclusivity. So this year, this is the makeup of our task force. We have two returning student members, Tyrone Nishita and Rosalind Kars joined us. She was in the cohort beginning this time last year. I'm the faculty lead for the committee. We also have Rana, Aline, and Clarice from the DFP staff, which means that we have a really broad reach across the different functions of DFP, both getting input from how what's been happening and what we can expect to come up in order to have input into those, into the design of our programs, into the execution of events like these. But we most want to hear from our student members of what could make DFP a more inclusive community for you. So with that in mind, we have office hours, drop-in hours scheduled each month. You can find those on the dfp.ubc.ca website soon under the DFP initiative. We already have some scheduled for later this month and then through October, November, and December. There will often be during this time block, since we expect that many of you have this time set aside in your calendars. So on weeks that there are not DFP events, we also have some scheduled at off times, understanding that folks pack everything they can into their day when they're commuting in. And so we have some online times occurring outside the normal course schedule. We're also inviting faculty and other graduate students who are leading research projects to contact the committee to serve as equity consultants for you. Many of the Tri-Council funding programs in Canada have new requirements around sex and gender equity work, around race and sexuality equity work. So if you want to workshop a research idea in progress, or you want to get broader input into the design of your research before submission, or because you got some feedback, you'll see an invite coming up from Aline shortly about how to get in contact with us and schedule those sessions. Basically, you can contact us. You can find our profiles on the DFP website, linked from the DFP initiatives page. They have our email addresses listed. We are welcome to hear from any of you about ideas that you have that you want to be featured in our DFP programming, or things that we could adjust or troubleshoot for you in making this an inclusive space. Right. Thank you for giving me the time.
All right. So I would like next to introduce Professor Ben Mortensen, who's a colleague of mine in OSOT, who's going to introduce our speaker today. Come on up, Ben.
All right. Well, it's a really great pleasure to introduce Dr. Sylvain Moreno. And he is a associate professor in computational neuroscience at the School of Interactive Arts and Technology at Simon Fraser University. He's a special advisor to the Vice President, Research and International Office and Scientific Director of AgeWell, National Innovation Hub, Circle Innovation. And actually, that's where we met. It's probably been 10 years. Yeah, so because I was part of AgeWell at its inception, and Sylvain was part of AgeWell at its inception. So yeah, we've been bumping into each other over the last 10 years. So it's really nice to have him here. So Dr. Moreno's research program focuses on brain plasticity and its implications for longevity. This program incorporates multiple testing platforms, including computational, genetics, and neuroimaging. And Dr. Moreno has been a member of the New York Academy of Science since 2006 and other prestigious scientific organizations. He's been a recipient of many awards from national and international organizations, such as the Brainstorm Innovation Prize from Stanford Medical School in 2017. And his work has received widespread press in various media outlets, including the New York Times. So people can put their hands together and give a warm welcome. Thank you.
Let's show you the screen here.
Here, right?
Hey, everybody. Hi, everyone. I changed the title, if you can see, it's a case for neuro-design, because Lisa sent me an email yesterday and said, Sylvain, you need to talk about design and creation of technology. So I changed a little bit the talk, and I create a whole new talk just for you guys. So that means be kind with me, because it's my first time. Okay, so I'm going to try to explain to you what we do in my lab, but also the specific or the particular path that we take to create technologies. So the outline. So what do we do in my lab? Our research, our learnings, the circle innovation model. So this is a model I created, or I funded to try to help creating technology in health. 5, our longevity research program, and then a take-home message. Please do not hesitate if you have any question to stop me or anything like that. I know that the audience is very multidisciplinary, so I will not go into the details of the studies, but if you have any question, I'm very happy to answer them. Okay, so the goal of my lab is to create neurotechnologies, technology for the brain. What we do is we try to bring together neuroscience and interactive digital media design. So one thing that people overlook all the time is this quote: patients don't use treatment they don't believe in. When you work in medicine, you feel like, oh, I find a cure and you're going to save the life of patients. And you cannot involve it as a medical system. right? So patient has to be part of the creation of the solution. And they don't use technology that fail to meet their needs. So those are some of the technologies that we created across the years in my lab. Most of them are digital solutions for example, training the brain. And we use a lot of video games to do that. Probably the most famous one is the Muse, which is an EEG headset to measure your brainwave that is used across the world. Okay, so before we start again, I want to try to explain you how did I came here today? Like what happened in my life to do this kind of research? So first, I did two very big learning. One was in neuroscience and one was in design. The first one in neuroscience comes from that question. So how many people have been involved with human research study with less than 50 participants in the group? Well, almost everybody, right? Yeah, that was my case too, right? And that's still my case from time to time. But what happened in the 2010s is that we realized that all the studies with low sample size have very hard time to be replicated. So for example, the study in Ellis, this only take the top, like the top tier of journal where study in medicine have been published, only 11% can be replicated. That means like 89% of all the studies with low sample size cannot be replicated. And that asks a question for us as scientists. Even if my effect is significant, what does it mean if I cannot reproduce it? Right. So sometimes we are there like to try to find something where we can believe in, right? And so those small samples really bring us toward direction that are actually our wrong direction for our research. And so I completely modified my lab in 2010, and I tried to really look at all this.
I just have a small question. If you could collapse that, we could see the slides.
I don't, it's not me. I think it's me? So maybe I can.
It's not showing.
It's not showing here, but fine.
Oh, no, I was just saying that. That small window of everyone else.
There you go. Yeah. Or maybe just like use.
Yeah, not that, but go on. Thank you so much.
Okay, no problem. Thank you for your. Okay, so the point was like, okay, so one way to address this issue of small samples is to have very large population. And as you know, that was not only my path, there is like humongous database all across the world that are developed by our community. And so this idea of like, okay, if we can gather this large population to understand how we should create technologies, then we create all the problems that we need computational methods. Because when you have more data, the data are richer and it's more difficult to understand them. So you need very large computational method that can address those kind of issues. So that was the first step for me, how I modify my lab. So I changed from a lab where we are like 20 to 50 participants per study to try to design a technology to when we have like several thousands. For example, now we're working, some of my students that are in the room, they are working on database of 55,000 people, 20,000 people. So they're like, you can imagine the amount of data that we have to deal with. The second learning that I did in my career to come to this neuro type of design is by developing a video game to help a patient with language impairments. So that's a video game that have been now is in school and clinical settings, and he addressed kids between 3 and 6 years old. And so when we started designing this game, So first wave, we bring like graphic artists, computer scientists, neuroscientists, composer, because it was a game based on music, all at the table to try to make the best game that we can. When we finish our first version, everybody asked us, but did you ask teachers? Say, oh no, we didn't ask teachers. Okay, so we have to go back and try to involve teachers in it. So we were kindergarten teachers and music teachers. So we went like wide. And then they say, did you ask school boards? Did you ask clinicians? No, we didn't. And then we did that to that. So to give you an idea of those processes, we have so many waves that this lasted 3 years. And this is like this complexity of like when you work in an environment where there is a lot of stakeholders, and health is one of them. So what did I learn? Well, that we were wrong. And the main learning here is the design process needs a multi-stakeholder approach. Okay, but a lot of design what we do, it's a multi-stakeholder approach. We design whatever we want to design, and then we go and ask like 20 people what they think about it. That's not what I'm talking about here. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more. Different stakeholders, I like to use this image, it's like kind of Lego cube, all different shape, all different colors, all different size, and then you have to try to build something with all those components. So in health, if we look at kind of the basic stakeholders, would be like patient user, caretakers, health practitioners, scientists, Ministry of Health, student, industry, insurance and reimbursement. So you can see that first, most of the students, when they arrive and they have to do something like that, so this is too much. I will never have time to do that in my master or my PhD. So that's one aspect. But if you don't do that, the technology will never go out of the time. Or if you go out, it's because you have been. Because any of those people can block the technology. Right? And this is the understanding that sometimes is because we're creating something for the health or for patients, and we're going to try to make their life better, we think that the product or the technology will be accepted right away because there is a good intention behind it. But so that's the first trap that you should not fall into. And so what I created is I created a model that we call circular innovations that has been quite successful, and now we became a grant agency. I was tired to send grants that the reviewer cannot understand, and so I decided to create a grant agency to help people like me who try to create technology for patients and try to work in collaboration between academia and industry. So if you have a project with academia and industry, please feel free to apply to Circular Innovation. I think the website. We have funding that go from $50,000 for a small project to $500,000. The point of that, again, is to bring all the stakeholders that we talked about before all together at the start of the project, to design the project together. And as for some of you that create technology, it's not a small task. That's why we have this grant agency. So this grant agency has a network of over 250 partners across PC. So that's industry, that's clinics, hospitals, health authority, not-for-profit, universities, to bring the partners that are necessary for the project. And so when all the partners come together, then the project can start with the management of the project and the creation of the product. And happy to go in more details if you want, but okay, so now I'll go back to my original talk a little bit, but I thought it was important for you to understand that how we conceive creating technologies. And it's probably different than other labs, or at least it was different from what I was doing like 10 years ago. On longevity research program. So one thing that you have to know is and I want to thank one of my students because that's one of the slides. Emma, thank you very much. Emma is finishing her PhD, and so I thought it was important for me to talk about her work. For the faculty in the room, she might consider postdocs. So you have the life expectancy, but this life expectancy in the next 30 years is going to increase dramatically. So what we're going to have as an increase is, okay. So we're going to have like around 10% of increase of life expectancy. And that's something that we should all be thankful for, right? This is like the modernization of the health systems, the improvement of the sanity in cities, etc. So that's really great. I mean, like in average, we're gonna all live 10 more years. Great. So not the issue, but the question here is like, are we gonna live these 10 more years in medical facility? Or are we gonna live these 10 more years in our house with our family around us? And that's really what we want to work on when we work on longevity, is increasing the lifespan that is in health. To give you an idea of how dementia is a major issue in the medical system, projected to increase to 70% in the next 15 years. 33 billion per year currently. That's the cost of dementia. So you can imagine an increase of 70%. Over 99% of dementia drug trials have failed. So we have no solution. Average time to bring a new drug to market, 12 years. So those problems, this is the situation that we started with when we started this project. And you can see that this is not, encouraging in some ways. So what we decided is like, how can we create a non-drug alternative to sustain brain health, to give those 10 more years or more healthy to people? So this is a project that we have in collaboration with YMCA, SFU, City of Surrey, the Ministry of Health of British Columbia, Edgewell, that I just mentioned. Edgewell is a network center of excellence. We have also funding for students. If you do technology in aging, please keep us in mind. We support graduate students, but we also support PI with projects. We just received a new funding from the federal government of 47 million that we to build technology for aging, and with my tax. So what we did, we used the model that we used before. So we meet all of us and we try to understand how can we create a solution, or what type of solution is needed by the senior population. And so we defined the active aging project. So one of the aspects of it was we wanted to create an interactive digital solution for seniors to know what they can do using what is around them. What was very important for us is to create a solution that they can use right now, not in 10 years, not in 20 years. If some of you have a patient or family member that are going through disease, you know that you don't care about the new drug that's going to be available in 5 years. Right? We want a solution now. So we wanted to make sure that whatever we create can have an impact that is possible right now. So this is all of my collaborators that are involved here. This is Emma, if you want to see her in the room. Participating in that project. This project has 3 stages. The first one is we did a literature search. What are the potential factors involved in healthy aging? Right? What are the triggers that we can use, or the factors that we can use to develop that technology that will have an impact on the brain of seniors? Then we use large data sets and develop computational process to understand how different factors can impact health. So that was very important for us, because when you use large data sets, you can divide your data set into gender, race, and all of the factors that you can think about that are important for you and for the population you're working with. The third one is use our result to design the interactive digital solution. So our first step is to co-design all together. Try to understand what is the path that you can take. The second step is really for us to try to understand at the human level what's happening and how we can, in what direction we should push the solution. And the third stage is to create the digital solution. So when we did the literature search, what we found is a lot of claims have been made about like, we find things like, oh, if you eat burnt toast, you live 10 years less. And some kind of crazy, research finding lines like that, which be careful, like, some people try to sell some papers on that this is not true, right? So, but what we find is we find exactly the same problem that we find overall in the literature. Always small sample, results cannot be reproduced, and we have a lot of issue of understanding what, we find like millisecond difference if you do this or if you do that in your cognitive skills, performance. So nothing really concrete. But we find two main factors that work really well to help you live healthier longer. Your education, so if you have a bachelor, and your genetics. And so you can imagine what was the look of the patient and the senior stakeholders that were in our group. We're like, okay, I cannot change my genetic, and I'm definitely not going back to university. So like the two factors that tell me have an impact are meaningless to me. Right? So what we find as like a small direction with a little bit of marginal effect was like there is some life activities that could improve the brain or show some early finding where we showed an improvement in cognitive performance. So we decided to try to explore that area. So our study goal was to identify and quantify which life activity has an impact on cognitive health in aging. And so we use this information to create the digital solution. So for our study, what we did, we used the health and retirement study database. This is a USA longitudinal survey that started in mid-80s, conducted by the Institute for Social Research, University of Michigan. Approximately 20,000 respondents every 2 years on subjects such as healthcare, housing, asset, pension, employment, activity, disability, and cognitive health. So we have a lot of data in that database. We have like how many phone calls they pass every week, who they are calling to, do they play cards, do they meet? So it's very, very global in terms of a life activity that you can do or that people can do. That was very important for us because we wanted, again, to build a solution with factors that they can use right now anywhere they are in British Columbia, right? We didn't want like just to do something that exists in Vancouver, but having some ideas of factors that can be used at home. So our method and inclusion criteria, we study people between 65 and 89 years old. So respondents had to have records on education, memory assessment, and life activities. And respondents had to have gone through typical testing procedure. If you are not familiar with working with database, a database is kind of like your worst student who did their homework. And so this is like thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of data where there is hole everywhere. So you really spend, like, for example, on the last database we just worked like on that, the UK bank database, if you're familiar with it, 55,000 people. It took us 2.5 years just to filter the database. Not to do any study, just to make sure that everything is at the place that it is. So there is a lot of work doing that. And those is why it's very important to qualify who you're going to involve in your studies. Those are part of that. We divide that in 5 groups. This was to understand how those factors evolve, or the impact of those factors evolve across time and across age. And we took a cognitive health proxy to evaluate the cognitive brain performance, the task world we call, because this is the very well-known clinical test about memory, and well used since like probably over 50 years. So we have 3-stage process. One, identify potential factors that can influence cognitive health during aging. Second one, quantify the factor ability to predict changes in cognitive health using machine learning, right? We wanted to try to understand if you start at 70, can it have an impact, right? Because we have this idea, and most of us do that in science, is like when we define a population, let's say seniors, we all consider seniors as one, right? Even like when we say student population, we all consider you as one, right? And so we wanted to try to understand that particularity. Can we really consider the senior population as one? Like every individual is the same in some ways? Or is it not? Okay, so our results were like, one thing that we always do when we work with very large database, we try to replicate the main finding in the field to make sure that what we are observing or what we are analyzing makes sense, right? Because again, when you have like 20,000 people, you're getting far from the individual, right? So like it's very difficult and abstract. So that's a very important point for the students that are in the room. What we find also, so we study over like 40 life factors, and we found that 17 life activities were associated with small change in cognition. This is important because right now there is this race in neuroscience where it's okay, if I do some exercise, can I get better? Or if I get fish oil, can I get better? Or if I play music, can I get better? Or if I do yoga, do I get better, right? You have those press, like every September, we have like those news, right? Like you have to do 10 minutes of exercise every morning, or you have to, like recently it was like not that I'm against that, I think this is really great, but there is this kind of like prophecy where we try to find the little stuff that's gonna really make us like a big change, right? So I'm sorry for the people who do the 10 minutes every morning, but okay, so this is actually the impact on the brain of the participant of each of the 17 variables, plus the baseline cognition, which will be something that you can relate as genetics, and education. So you can see the size of the effect of genetic and education, and the size of the effect of the activities that you can do. Right? So when we saw that, we were a little bit depressed. We were several years into the project, we're like, this is like less than 0.1. That's what we're gonna do. Okay, maybe we went into the wrong road, right? Like, and I think that's a good, fair question to ask yourself when you're in the middle of the project, right? It's always what I tell to my students: always better to stop the project, okay, even if you spend 1 year on it, then continue where it's going nowhere. If you know that this was the wrong idea, just get another idea. Okay, so that was kind of disappointing in some ways. And so, but you have to understand, we did that step here because that's what people publish all across the world right now, right? They do karate, three months of karate, what do we have? 3 months of this, what do we have, right? That's what they do. So we really wanted to try to understand if there was, when we get thousands of people, is there any validity? Because all those studies have like 30, 40 participants. So then what we decide to do is say, sorry. Okay, we decide to have, and that's an idea of one of my students, Olga, that she said, oh, well, why don't we collapse all activity in one variable? Okay. She's a computer scientist, and so she was seeing data just as data instead of me. I was like, well, I'm going to collapse like karate and music. I'm not sure like what is the sense of that or anything like that. But then we thought that that was a great idea because you can actually, go go see your friend on Tuesday, then you have like bridge on Wednesday, then you go music on Thursday night, and dancing on Saturday night, right? And that would be all the activities. So it makes sense for us after that. And so same graph than before, right? And I'm just going to take those two and zoom on it. Okay. So again, remember, Bayesian cognitions are genetic variable, and education is you doing studies in bachelor or graduate or high school or whatever, right? So you can see that baseline cognition, so genetic has more impact on your brain skill performance when you age than education, and those two have way more impact than any other activities, right? But when we combine the 17 activities together, that's what we find. So when you combine all the activity together, it actually is stronger or at least similar than genetic. One interesting finding with that is the direction across age. So each bin represents 5 years, right? 65, 69, 17, 74, 75, 79, 18, 84, 85, 89. And you can see that the importance of those activities increase for your cognitive performance. So it's more important for you to do those activities when you are 85, let's say, than even when you are 65. Versus we have the different trend for genetic and your education. So that was very interesting finding for us, but also is something that can be translated right away. So in AgeWell, for example, we work with all the long-term care facilities across the country. And one thing that we translate to them with those findings is like, you need your, the people that are in your facilities to move, do several activities. Is more important when they are older than even when they are in the facilities, right? Because well, the tendency of what we do for us is like, oh, no, don't move and don't do it, right? Or like, oh, you're tired, you should just sit, like watch TV or what, right? That's the worst you can do in some ways. Because your activity is what is the most important as you age. So when we find that, we say, oh, we are maybe in the direction of something to create or technology, right? Because we knew that doing activity was extremely important. And not only one activity, but multiple different activities. So richness in a variety of activities. I'm happy to take any question if you have questions. Yes?
I wanted to speak a bit on correlation versus causality relationship. Because there are people having these activities. It doesn't necessarily mean that the kind of impact felt great.
You're totally right. So most of the factors that I showed is correlation. So this is a little bit like the difficulty that we have in this field or with this type of methodology. It's like to run a very large clinical trial, you need 50 million, right? So to run that clinical trial in causal relationship, you would be more than 50 million with 20,000 people and across the country. So, so obviously, I didn't get a grant of 50 million yet to do that kind of studies. But I think the point for us is to, or I think the step that we are doing in that direction right now is with my lab, we are actually creating computational model that can actually ask the causality of those effects, the question of causality of those effects within an already developed or collected database. That will be the next stage for us. One of the students that work here is Tara. If you can raise your hand, people want to ask a question. So we're trying to develop this model to actually mine the data for asking that question. That's the most important question for us. We have actually developed already a model on that. The paper has been published Arab and All 2022, where we are succeeding to show some form of causality with those kinds of data. So that's the next step for us to really understand that.
I have another question.
Yeah.
So do you look into diet as another factor at all?
That's an interesting question. You seeing like my research program. Did you read one of my grants that I sent? Because we didn't look into diet there because there was no data on that right there. But what we are doing right now is we are working. So that's another of my students if she's in the room. I am. So we're looking at the gut bacteria brain axis. And we're seeing some relationship there. And so that's what we're exploring. So it's not really diet, but it's in that direction.
Gut bacteria is significantly determined by the diet. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and definitely, I think this is like very, very important, the diet. I think this is one of the area where we really have to push forward to try to understand. And especially in Canada, because of the diversity of the population and the diversity of the diet, understanding this influence is key. Yeah, for sure. Engagement in a single activity has little impact. Engagement in several life activity is an increasing key factor at senior age. Second study, what we did is as you can see, like we were not totally satisfied because we didn't find one easy solution that we can implement. We understand that brain can be changed or we can induce some plasticity or some improvement across the aging process. But we wanted to try to find a way where we can be more helpful for seniors that guide them more in terms of what kind of activity, what they should do extra. And so what is the relationship between lifestyle factor and cognitive health in healthy older adults? Here we did so we use exactly the same database. We studied 36 variables across the lifespan. We stratified the population into 5 groups based on their cognitive performance from low to high cognitive performance. And we use an ordinal logistic regression to predict the impact of each life factor on cognitive performance. So it's exactly the same database. So those are the data. So they are a little bit complex. I'm going to try to guide you through it. So here we have marginal effect. I mean, like when the effect is significant. Then we have the 5 groups. So this is low cognitive performance, 2, 3, 4 to high cognitive performance. And here we have all the variables that have been significantly impacting the brain through aging. So in the whole database, those are the 12 variables that come out positive. How you can read this graphic? So here you can see that in yellow you have smoke. So smoke is positively associated with group 1. I mean, let's say more you smoke, more you have chances to be in group 1. Low cognitive performance, right? And then we have, for example, here is education. It's negatively associated with group 1. So more education you have, less chance you have to be in group 1 in low cognitive performance. Does it make sense for everybody? Yeah? Okay. And obviously, that's the opposite. So education is associated positively with high cognitive performance. So more education you have, more chance you have to be in the high cognitive group. Yeah.
Drink means alcohol, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
Like exercise and hobby is negative is bad for you.
There is some surprising results. Yes. And so when we can go to every individual, but I want to just go with the main finding, and then if you have questions, I'm super happy to go each on each. You can see in that graph that we have those kind of like huge impact on the low cognitive group and the high cognitive group, right? This is like pretty robust in the literature. You have those effects. It's kind of like thing that we are very comfortable in, right? But what was surprising to us is when you get to the average performance, you have less and less effect or less influence on cognitive performance. So this, if some of you are familiar with this theory, there is actually a theory in developmental science, so a science that focuses on children and their development, was called the Dandelion and Orchid theory. This is linked to the relationship that humans have with their environment. So the theory states that way, that you have individuals that are environmentally sensitive and individuals that are environmentally non-sensitive. Okay, so for us, the graph look a little bit like that, where we had like those two groups that look like extremely sensitive to the environment, and this group that were almost no impact. Okay, so this is something that we find a lot in clinical trial, but we never explain it. We call that the non-respondent. Anybody run clinical trials are always non-respondent, right? Right, and we always, when we did say, well, we don't know why it didn't work, or like maybe there is something else. It's always something that there is no explanation about. This theory has one possible way to explain that phenomenon with environmentally non-sensitive group. So let me show you, give you more explanation of that. So does aging follow an orchid and dandelion phenomena, where we have a part of the population that is sensitive to the environment and one that is non-sensitive to the environment? Okay, so one of the robust findings that we have in medical science is the fact that 15 to 20% of the population experience a majority of all of the physical and psychological illnesses. Right? In our population, 15 to 20% of people experience all those issues. And around 80% of the population does that. And why it was so important for at the medical level, because if we can find a way to protect those people, then we can reduce the cost of healthcare, but we can also. So I give you a little bit of background on those theory. So like, you know, obviously if everybody understood that it's 15 or 20% means orchid. Right? Why orchid? Maybe some people don't know the flower. So the orchid flower is a very fragile flower. But if you take care of the flower, it becomes wonderful. Right? So if the environment is harsh, I was going to die right away. But if the environment is good, it becomes one of the most beautiful. And dandelion, why dandelion? Because dandelion, even the concrete, you can find some from dandelion, right? That was definitely not my field of research, and it was very interesting for me when I learned about that, because I realized that one of my sons is an orchid and one of my sons is a dandelion. So for the parents in the room, if you want to test it, so the funny stuff, my son, like every morning, he didn't want to put his socks on. I'm like, we have to go to school. Put your socks on. Like, this is not complicated. It's just 2 socks. And the other one was already ready in the car, good to go, you know, like easy going. And I was getting upset at him all the time. Like, why are you making my life misery right in the morning? And so I realized that the test to dissociate orchid and dandelion kids is wool socks. So orchid kids cannot put wool socks on them. It bothers them. So maybe we can do a little test in the room. Who had issue with stickers? You know, like you have the stickers and it bothers you and you cannot think about anything else, right? Okay, so the people raise their hand, you're most likely to be an orchid, right? But it's very important to, at least for me, it changed really my relationship with my son, because I understand that it was not him trying to make my life difficult, But his life was way more difficult than me being a dandelion. That I don't care if I have wool socks or like a sticker there or no problem, right? One time I spent like 3 weeks with like the tag of the shop in my bag, and it didn't bother me at all. So those findings are pretty robust now. So the theory has like over 20 years. And so here you can see, again, that's the orchids, right? You can see here the stress in the social environment. And you can see on the left, the respiratory illness rate. So you can see that when there is no stress, there is no illness. When there is a lot of stress in the environment, there is a lot of rate of illnesses. Right? And let's look at the dandelion population here. Right? No matter what the stress is, dandelion grow. Now, another study where you have no maltreatment, probable maltreatment, and severe maltreatment. And here you have probability of major depression episode. So we can see the population of orchids. So no matter the population, still very low when there is no treatment, and higher when there is severe maltreatment. And if we go to look at the same, but for the dandelion, almost no change. So there is countless of study on that phenomenon in children, in animals, and it has been replicated over and over. It's a very strong finding in the literature. But we never thought about this type of pattern lasting over the adult age and the old age, right? That was one of the first findings that we had in the literature tend to show some kind of mechanism such as this one. Okay, so a conclusion here. The impact of this factor was not uniform across all individuals. This asks the question of heterogeneity. So, you know, like, and this is like a very current question, right? Because we right now in our society ask this question, right? Nobody wants to be the same right now, right? In our culture, we try to push our differences as things that define us in some ways, right? And so heterogeneity is very present. So, you know, we were always also asking in our lab, are we just like, because it's so present in the news and the culture that we are trying to impose that on our data in some ways, right? But this is a question that we need to have when we work with humans. Is our population homogeneous or is our population heterogeneous? And if our population is heterogeneous, at what point we have enough participants? Because if you all think that you are different in the room, right? And here today you are like over like 50 people. That means you cannot have 50 people in your studies because each of the people represent one group. Each person is different from the other. So that's a very important question for human research. Definitely in our case, we cannot go back and think that the senior population is just one. And we can just do a one-size-fits-all technology. Now, we have to take into account at least one subgrouping, which is like the dandelion and the orchid, or the environment non-sensitive versus environment-sensitive indicators. Second point is the analysis revealed dichotomous finding on individual overall susceptibility to lifestyle factors. So it's going to be very important when we build the technology that we know who is the individual that is using the technology, that we understand how we can define this person. And the technology needs to be adaptable and plastic enough to answer the different needs of the different subgroup of the population. So the next stage, when we finish those studies, the next stage for us is to go into the design of the technology. Because now we know what mechanism is impacting the brain and how and so we know how to impact it And so then we can develop the technology on this mechanism. So it's always like that in my lab. We always first try to design with all the stakeholders to go in direction. Then when we find the direction, we try to understand the fundamental mechanism at the neuroscientific level that can change the brain. And then we develop the technology. Okay, so the take-home message. And after that, I'm very happy to answer any question, or even now if you have a question. At the experimental level, I think the use of neuroscience for designing technology for humans, that's the case I make today. I think this is very important to go as deep as understanding the brain when you develop neurotechnologies. It's not true for every technology, but for some of them it is. One aspect is to understand that humans change all their life. That's very important when you develop a technology, because if you develop technology for one person at one time, or like 10 person at one time, you have very little chance to have this technology be used by everybody or helping most people can. So when I talk about it is heterogeneity. This is a new concept for us in neuroscience. More and more people are studying that. And that's why we have all those big, large databases. But this is going to be crucial in the next 10 years to really understand this level for human research. At the methodological level, I think there is 2 points for me that advance in this talk. First is a multi-stakeholder co-creation. I mean, bringing as many stakeholders you can when you design, even before thinking what you're going to do. Like, you have to have those stakeholders in the room, because you need to understand the problem and you need to understand the need, not from your point of view, but is obviously essential. So from your point of view, you understand those two factors, but from the point of view of all the stakeholders in the field, right? Like, one of the big push that I'm trying to do is for us to stop working in silos and to bring people to the table and collaborate. And obviously, I know when I'm saying that, this is not easy. I know. But that's why I created a grant agency to help. The second point is the potential of databases with the right computational tools. And even if you're not a computer scientist, you can collaborate with computer scientists. And this group is the portrait of that, right? Like this all those different science coming together to design technologies. So the potential of database allow us to go beyond the heterogeneity problem, but also to bring more faces to what is a human subject. To understand sometimes things that we didn't look for, like us with orchid and dandelion. There you go. That's it. Thank you very much.
So yeah, we're time for questions. Are we doing online questions as well?
Yeah.
Do you want to do online questions first or in-room questions first? We don't have much time.
We don't have any online questions.
Oh, perfect. Let's do in-room questions first. I saw a hand.
Like funny, you were talking about how education and genetics is like kind of was the core finding. And in my head, there's like this flag talking to be like, how much is like wealth disparity an aspect of this? And like, was that measured?
Okay, so it was not measured, but like
Just repeat the question for people.
oh yes, a very interesting question. It's like one of the big factors we know for development, for example, in children, is wealth disparity, which social class you are in. So most of the databases, they are not allowed in the state to ask for this kind of things in research. So we have proxies of those. So one of the proxies is mother education is one of the proxies, or your own education. So it's not really as good as having that. So I can, we didn't study that, so I cannot tell you the result in our study, but I can tell you maybe like the result in the field. So he has an impact, but it's kind of my understanding of the effect is a trade-off. So until a certain point, he has an impact and then he has no more impact. And lower a certain point, he has huge impact and then he has no impact. So so he will, for category 5 and 1, for example, certainly could have an impact. But then for the main effect of the average, normally, we don't know. We'll have to study that. But my hypothesis will have that I don't know if we'll have a strong impact on those findings. Yes.
No question. I'm just a little bit confused on the findings. So I think it's your last slide that you found that several activities were associated with better content.
Yeah.
But you were developing technologies, next stage of developing technologies. Do they need technology to do the activity and get the analysis? Isn't that? I'm not too sure the link with the next step.
Oh, yeah, okay. I see what
You
you mean.
understand what-
Yeah, and it makes sense. Okay, so let me. Our goal, fundamental goal, is to create a system in which we provide activities like we provide drugs. Right? Like you go to your doctor. I got I don't know, COVID. I need to get prescription with different drugs. I need to follow it. And so what we would like to do, and it's not only us, it's like, this is actually like in UK, it's already working that way, where we have a system where the medical doctor don't only prescribe drugs, but prescribe activity that could be beneficial for you. So the difficulty of doing that, one, is to understand what are the activities that are possible around the house of this person, and also with her specific health, patterns. In some ways, like, some people can have an issue with the hip when you get old, so you're not going to prescribe Samba. But this is where we thought the digital technology could help, is by having a place where you can actually understand everything that is offered around, right? And also being able to create those programs for them. I mean, you can have, bridge on Monday, calling this person on Tuesday, extra. So to have this kind of like easy access for the seniors, but also create an interface with the medical staff. Yeah, sorry. So this movement is called social prescribing. And he actually, the first few studies that came out in UK show that it's very beneficial for the population.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moreno. I think we should probably wrap it up officially at this point, because we're a little over time already. But I'm perhaps still willing to stay around and ask.
Yeah. I'm super happy to
So if people have extra questions when they have time, please come to the front and ask them. And thanks again for being here for the first session of September 2023. Woo woo!
Thank you for having me.
Oh yeah, that's lovely.